Hi, this is Jeff Altman, the Big Game Hunter, and you are watching Job Search TV. Yay! I'm doing something a little bit different today where I'm having a guest on. And if you've watched any of my videos for any length of time, you know most of the time it's me. But I met Sharon Sayler through the Forbes Coaches Council that I'm a part of. And she's a body language expert. Now, before we go into what a body language expert is and how she became one, Sharon is the author of 7 books, including a perennial favorite called What Your Body Says and How to Master the Message, which is published by Wiley. She works with professionals on powerful communication skills to achieve their goals, including being effective on interviews, and is listed on globalgurus.org as one of the top 20 for body language worldwide. Sharon, how are you today? Welcome.
I'm great. Thanks for inviting me. I'm so excited to be here.
You're welcome. Where are you? Where in the world is Sharon Sayler today?
Oh, that's a good question because that does change, as you know, Jeff. But I'm in Portland, Oregon today. I'm enjoying Oregon's crisp, cold weather, although it's not snowing or anything. It's just nice and crisp here. I love it.
And where I am in Asheville, North Carolina, I believe it's in the low 40s. And I just went out to chase a woodpecker who was attacking the house. And yes, it was noticeable. You notice 40s. So
Yes.
before we discuss weather in our respective locales and get caught up on that and bore everyone to tears, how does someone become a body language expert?
Oh, great question. Although I have to say, I'm sure I took a route that maybe I'm the only one that ever took this route. What happened was about 25 years ago, I was going through a rough patch in my life. And my friends know when Sharon's going through a rough patch, teach her something, take her somewhere, intrigue her, do something. So we all piled in the car and went away for a weekend communications class that one of them had heard about, and it was just raring to go. It was an awesome class, but they had speakers. They had the first Saturday morning 4 hours was one particular person, and then the afternoon, that kind of thing. Well, that very first speaker is the world's foremost nonverbal communication expert for classroom teachers. So what his expertise is actually teaching body language and nonverbal communication for teachers to manage classrooms. But it's all transferable. Body language is body language.
Right.
I'll tell you, I was mesmerized. And what he did about halfway through the break, I used to be one of those people, believe it or not, that sat in the back of the room sort of taking notes and like, don't look, I'm just invisible back here. Used to be one of those. But he noticed there was, 50, 70 people in the room, something like that. He came back during the break and whispered in my ear, let's go for a walk. And oh my gosh, I have to tell you, that triggered me into that point of like, what did I do wrong? So went for a walk like a psychic reading. It was, I swear, I went back to my friends and I said, did you rat me out? Because he's like, you're going through a rough patch in your life. You're in the creative field, which at the time I owned a graphic design and marketing company. It was just like, okay. And then walked me back to my seat. As I sat down, he leaned over, whispered in my ear and said, oh, and if you think with your mouth closed, you'd look as intelligent as you are. I didn't know what he meant by that, but since we're here on the YouTube, I'm going to show you what that is. And if you listen in audio, it's the mouth wide open look, the deer in the headlights, so wide eyes, jaw wide open, just mesmerized, absolutely. And that, I have to tell you, that is not an intelligent look. It's true. But there are a lot of people that do that unconsciously. Mine was because I was mesmerized, but I've since found out some people do it because maybe they have allergies and their nose is kind of stuffy and they have developed the habit of being a mouth breather. But that's just a little aside there.
I'm one of those, as a matter of fact, deviated septum. So people will tend to see me that way. But rather than focus all of our attention on how you became one, let's start to use some of that experience. So
Great.
I'll start off with my bias. I tend to think people aren't hired because of body language. They'll be rejected because of body language and nonverbal communications. we haven't spoken about this before, so I'm just curious whether you agree or disagree, and it's okay to disagree. My feelings don't get hurt.
I have to say both. It
Ah,
really depends because you can build rapport with your body language where someone just goes, "Oh, I like that guy. I like that gal. I like
yeah.
them." And that's by well placed mirroring and matching someone else's body language. Now, this is not mimicry. Some people
Mhm.
start doing, like he's moving his hand, so I'm going to move my hand. That's mimicry.
Yeah.
But, if someone leans in, you lean in. It's really just nice to get close to each other that way if they lean in, that type of thing. But if you've got really unusual body language where someone just goes, this is incongruent, what their body is doing is totally different than what their mouth is saying,
Hmm.
you are absolutely correct. People are going to go, yep, nope, check the box. I don't get him.
Right. So when I think of interviewing in body language, most people I think tend to think of it in the interview room. But I'm wondering if it doesn't actually start before then, before when they arrive, they get out of the car or get off the subway or bus or whatever it is. When do you see the prep or the body language um, routine really starting?
Twofold. First, it has to start in our mindset when we're going in. So set the intention that you are going to be confident and put together and show up in your best possible way, because the
Hmm.
mind plays a huge part in how we show up in our body language. And then the second is the minute you step onto the property. I have been to large corporations where they have the doorman or the security guard even reporting back. What did that person do right before
Yes.
they came in the door? So you're being watched whether you like the idea of that or not. But just be on your best behavior the minute you set on the property.
I agree with you. I know for organizations that I used to do recruiting for back in those days, security guard, the reception, certainly. When I was doing work for some of the old line Wall Street firms, it was the shoe shine guy who was asked questions about the person and their behavior and how they were treated. Everyone is an observer from the time you walk in the door, and sometimes with the cameras outside before you walk in the door.
Absolutely. Very true, especially today with more and more surveillance types of opportunities. But that's so true because how you treat the shoe shine man is how you're going to treat everybody else. And that's important to companies.
And not just simply on the interview over breakfast, lunch, or dinner. It's every place along the way is a reflection of who you are in relation to other people.
Absolutely. I always say anybody can appear normal for a few minutes. So it's important. And if you're doing the interview, you have to realize that, okay, they're probably on their best behavior because they know I'm the one who's going to sign on the line. But how were they with everyone else? Were they equally as gracious and equally as competent and other types of ideas?
So we have them coming up the elevator. They're going in for the interview, and let me ask you this: in terms of how they present, what sort of posture, what sort of manner do you suggest someone carry themselves with as they greet reception or greet people within the organization prior to getting to the decision maker or the person that's being interviewed?
Oh, great question. I say just breathe deep, low, and slow because that will lower your cortisol and you'll get your butterflies flying in formation. So we can psych ourselves up on that elevator ride like, oh my goodness. So on the elevator ride, just keep talking yourself to breathe low and slow and extend the exhale because that's where the body relaxes is on the exhale. And then when you meet people, the receptionist there, have a smile or a neutral face. It can just be relaxed face. And when you meet them and you say, hi, I'm Sharon, and I'm here for the interview, and they say, oh, I'm Steve. And I say, hi, Steve, nice to meet you. Get a bigger smile when you say Steve's name, because that makes Steve feel like that smile was just for him. It works well, and so you could do that also with anyone else you meet on this trip back to the office, including the person who's going to do the interview. So having a special smile just for each person's name really starts the rapport.
So I want to just check one thing from a gender perspective. I always become concerned that there are situations where in male-female interactions, the developing the bigger smile can be misinterpreted. It's
Oh, good
stupid.
question. No, it can be misinterpreted. So there are a couple of things about the smile. When I say a bigger smile, I don't mean a extended smile. When you say Steve's name, it's just a nice, oh, hi, Steve, nice to meet you. And then you go back to a neutral face. If I continued that smile, or if I tipped my head left or right, that becomes sort of a submissive smile, which is different. And now I'm playing the gender card.
Got it.
As well as if I extended my eye contact. I always say consistent, not constant eye contact. However, in this case, Steve and I were talking, and if I extended to have constant eye contact with the submissive chin and the extended smile, that's extremely playing the gender card, which is unfair, because that is absolutely picked up as being ultra feminine. And that's really not what I want to project when I'm in the office. I want to project competent.
Right. Competent, effective, successful. Uh, the normal thing I'll tell people is competence is only one of the measures that firms evaluate for: self-confidence, character, chemistry, maybe a little bit of charisma, all of which translate into a form of leadership style or presence that allows people to trust them that much more.
Absolutely. But let's jump into male to male. Let's say I'm Fred and I meet Steve.
Yes.
And I there again have a nice to meet you, Steve. Just a smile on his name, and I go back to my neutral face. Here again, I want to keep my chin parallel to the ground. Most men don't tend to tip their head. It tends to be more of a female thing. But it's important that here again, I want to make consistent eye contact, but not constant. Because if male to male, when you've got too much eye contact, it can begin to create a fight or flight response in the other person. Like,
Right.
why are they staring at me? Sort of when you see two dogs getting ready to fight with each other, that's what constant eye contact between two men can raise that fight or flight response. So I suggest it's fine to look away. It's fine to, if you're going, well, Sharon, I don't know what to do. He's looking at me. Compliment the office. Look around and say, oh, what a lovely office, or what an amazing view. There's always reasons that you can look away.
And then there's the handshake, of course, the classic male bastion of are we equals? Is one person dominant? The other one is less dominant? Whether they can be met with comparable handshakes, or whether one is just sufficiently overbearing. Am I right?
Oh, absolutely. Handshakes. We could spend an hour on handshakes. But in short, match the handshake. Now, some people, this tends to be more male than not, but I've seen some women do it as well. Well, as you said, play the power game. And a couple of things they'll try to do is, instead of having the hand sideways, like most handshakes are, I know this is kind of awkward on video because my hand is up near my face, they will try to turn your hand down and their hand up.
So
You're down.
when I release this for audio, I just want people to know that when it's in the down position, you're holding your hand as though it's out to accept something from someone.
I call it the beggar's palm when it's like this. So my palm is facing up and the back of my hand is facing down. And that's a lot of people, that's a power move. What they're trying to do is called one up, one down. And they're trying to be the one up. So they'll turn your hand down. Now, depending on your strength, I suggest just counterbalancing it with your weight, with your wrist, and making sure that your hand doesn't turn down. Now, in all honesty, if they want to win the game, don't let them break your wrist. Just let them win the game.
Right.
but
You've learned something about them.
Yeah, you absolutely learn something about them. Another interesting thing that people do is not want to give like a full handshake. Sometimes people come in over the top, so their fingers are just sort of grasping your fingertips or something. It's very awkward, but go ahead and just let it go, because you're not the one making the handshake decision here. But a really nice technique to know about what somebody's current frame of mind is during the handshake, and we're going to call this just a normal handshake where you're both doing it what we call the socially acceptable way. where both of you greet hands and it's just a couple of shakes and you let go. Notice what they're doing with their eyes. If they're making direct eye contact with you the whole time and then not touching you with their other arm, like that with their other hand, like maybe they'll touch your elbow or something. If they're just making direct eye contact with you, they're in a real productive frame of mind. So they want to get right down to business. And if they're not, so maybe they're making very soft eye contact with you, they mention the brooch on your scarf, they touch your shoulder or something, they're in more of a community state of mind, and you would approach those people quite differently. In a productive state of mind, you get right down to business. What brought you here today? You start telling them exactly who you are and what brought you there. If they're in a community state of mind, they want to know you as a person. And so you would approach the conversation differently because they're in a community state of mind and want to know you as a person.
It's interesting because normally when I coach people about interviewing, I want the job hunter to start the conversation with the interviewer. And I'll say to them, as the two of you sit down, I want you as the job hunter to start the conversation and say something to the effect of, hey, thanks so much for making time to meet with me today. I spoke with so-and-so, whether it's the recruiter, corporate or third-party recruiter, whomever it is, and they tell me about the role, but I'd like to get your sense of it. Could you tell me about the job as you see it and what I can do to help? Now, I'm hearing something that from a body language perspective communicates whether or not this is a good technique.
It's a perfect technique. We might just change our language depending on how the person presented. Are they very much wanting to get down to business right away? I would shorten that. I would say, I would do the introduction and then immediately jump to telling me about the position or how I'm assuming you've had a chance to review my resume. How do you see the role playing out? So I would jump right down to business. Mm-hmm. Or if I thought, gosh, they seem very friendly and wanting to get to know me as a person during that first interaction as we walked back to the room, then I would be a little more complimentary and a little more less down to business, shall I say. So it's the same type of thing. And that when they're in a community, it'd be a bit longer of an introduction of why you're there.
Uh-huh. And you suddenly went chipmunk on me. So let's just see whether or not we're able to continue on. I saw you blink. That's good. And I'm seeing facial gestures. So I suspect the audio will be fine again.
Oh, I hope so. What do you,
perfect.
Should I? Okay.
No, we're perfect. So the interview now starts. You're seated in the chair, and thus you're going back and forth with one another. Is there a particular posture that works better for men, women, both? I defer to you and your expertise.
Well, I suggest sitting on the first 2/3 of the chair. Now, people that are naturally what we call visual learners tend to do this naturally, but kinesthetic learners, which are more physical type of learners, they like to sit back, all the way back on their chair. But what happens here when we're leaning back on the back, we tend to sort of begin to slouch and become too casual looking. Mm-hmm. So when we're sitting on just the 2/3 of the chair, it's just a structural thing. We tend to sit up straighter and have better posture when we're not leaning towards the back of the chair. And another thing, if you can choose where you sit, sometimes I'll have you in a big conference room, something like that. Try and choose a position where you're 90 degrees to the interviewer, because it's a power dynamic when you're sitting across a desk and looking at each other. It really is difficult because you end up having to make eye contact even when you're not wanting to make eye contact, because there's no real obvious way to look away without purposely looking away. But if you're at 90 degrees to each other, your eyes, you have to actually turn your head to make eye contact.
It kind of reminds me of the photo that's done in high school at graduation where people are kind of postured this way. Yes, and they're kind of looking over the shoulder. I'm wondering if, as I was hearing you say that, I was wondering, is 90 if you're seated in the chair, or 45?
Well, 90 degrees is easier to have purposeful eye contact and then to move eye contact. Because sometimes what happens in an interview, we begin to get a little nervous, whatever, or I wasn't expecting that question. And it's really nice to be able to look away or to look someplace else without. So you and I are facing each other across the desk, and if I look away, it's obvious. It's sort of like awkward. Oh my gosh, she just absolutely broke eye contact with me. It's sort of, now all of a sudden you're looking at my ear. But if we sit down at 90 degrees, it's perfectly normal for me to turn my head, make eye contact with you, and turn back away for just a minute because I'm just straightening my neck is all I'm doing.
Right. And it's interesting. I've been aware about the breaking eye contact thing. So I've always told people to look here or here because most people can't really tell the difference
Yeah.
between those two spots. So if you feel compelled to break eye contact, and it's interesting how you approach it differently.
Well, and another thing you can do if you're, oh my gosh, Sharon, I'm stuck across the desk from this person, use a plausible deniability statement such as like this. You take your finger to your chin and you look down and go, that's fascinating. Tell me more. So you take just a momentary second to put your finger to your chin, look down. That's fascinating, as if you're in thought. Pop back up and say, tell me more about that, or whatever the reasonable statement would be. Or you can do it looking up as well.
It's funny. As you did it, I did it as well. So
That's mirroring and matching. It's fascinating.
And I did it instinctively. So clearly I feel in sync with you. What else should we cover today? What's useful for people to know? Because we've been going for some time now. It's been really good. And awesome. I want to make sure that there's millions of topics around body language.
I think the key one, that's two key ones that are really important that we just briefly matched over, and is always be sure of your breathing. As you go through the interview, it will change. Fight or flight might kick in based on a question or some other thing. Maybe they looked at you over their glasses. A trigger for me is someone who looks over their glasses. And that's a trigger for me. It's a very stern look. So maybe you got triggered by something that you weren't expecting. So monitor your breathing, knowing you can reset your breathing without anybody knowing. Nobody can tell how you're breathing other than your voice. However, if you're like, oh, that just triggered me, I'm feeling a little flush of anxiety, stop, take a nice deep breath, reset your breathing, start again. So that's number one. Easy to do. Nobody knows you're doing it. Can completely be hidden. And the second one is to know what you're doing with your chin at all times. Now, I know this sounds funny, but keep your chin parallel to the ground. Too often people, especially when they're listening, men and women, we briefly touched on this when we were smiling, but tend to tip their head left or right when they're listening. And that's a submissive position. If that's what you want, that's fine. But just usually in a job interview, that's not a very good look to have that submissive position. The other problem with your chin not being parallel to the ground is maybe your chin is tipped down. People are going to think you're shy, not confident, not able to, really meet people where they're at. So, and the other one, which is really pretty interesting, is when you tend to talk with your chin up. Now, I often see this pose in people of short stature because they're so used to looking up, wanting to make eye contact with people, that even when they're seated, so maybe the eyes are more equal, they don't realize they're talking in this position. But as you could tell, it's very awkward because I've been talking to you in this position for a few seconds and I can already tell you're breathing differently because it's very awkward position. So just make sure your chin's parallel to the ground. And I always hear, but Sharon, I'm of short stature. You know what? Ask the person to sit down if it's that important, or just keep talking and they'll take a step back to make eye contact with you.
And this conversation about height differential reminded me of something from many years ago where I met someone's husband-to-be. I'm not 6'6", he was. And as such, when we did the handshake, clearly I was in the tilt back mode. And I recognized that what I needed to do in our conversation was to be just a little bit further back from him in order to ensure I was at the right eye level for my comfort as well. So he wasn't looking down on me and I was looking at an equal level with him. So I'm thinking in terms of in the initial greeting and the walk to the room, where the two of you might be doing the walk and talk to the interview space. That might be a useful strategy for someone.
Absolutely. If you need more space, just make it. You know, if you're walking side by side to someone and it just feels awkward, take a step left or right to give you just a little bit more space. And sometimes other people have closer personal boundaries than yours.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you want to understand in a job interview, you don't want to look paranoid or extreme or any of those things, but it's perfectly okay as you're walking down a hallway just to continue to step to the side an inch or two as you go until you get that space to be like, oh, okay, Sharon, here I can breathe, and I need to be breathing comfortably and not in fight or flight. By the time I get to that door, I still want to look confident. So be sure and set your own boundaries if you're feeling uncomfortable. There are little ways that you can just inch your way back into where you feel like, okay, this is the right amount of space.
Perfect. Hey, Sharon, is there something else I haven't asked you about today that I really should have?
Oh my goodness. You know, I think it's really important just to let your true personality shine. I don't like to choreograph body language. A lot of people will give you choreographed things to do, like the minute he or she crosses their leg, cross your legs. I just, let your true personality shine. Once they meet you, we don't want any surprises once that you've been hired. I mean, I don't know if that's ever happened to you, but I've met people and gosh, they were so nice in the interview. And all of a sudden we're surprised. So after you feel that there's a connection and rapport, just let who you are shine. Don't really worry about body language at that point. It becomes natural.
I agree wholeheartedly. Statistics I've seen from the employer side is that within 18 months of hiring someone, almost half of employers have buyer's remorse about the decision that they made. Now, part of that's about skills competence, obviously, but there's another part of it about disappointment in the relationship. And I know if that's true of employers, with job hunters, it's even a more severe number. And it happens much faster. So where you as a job hunter, as you being someone who's being interviewed, takes control through not leading the interview per se, but through your answers, you're guiding the interview and developing the flow of being natural for them so that you can size them up for who they really are instead of buying into the act. And vice versa. Each of you gets to know one another as you really are rather than how you behave during this process. Super.
Absolutely. You can seed your answers, by the way, such as things like you get an answer back, you're doing an answer, and I'd like to hear what you thought about that, or tell me more. You can always seed your answers to get more in depth. If your intuition, your gut is saying something's funny here, continue the conversation until you're clear.
Super. Hey, Sharon, thank you so much for making time today. How can people find out more about you and the work that you do?
Well, thank you. How kind. Yes, just pop over to SharonSayler.com. My last name is spelled Sayler. And Jeff, I've got a special gift for people if they want to pop over there and go. It's SharonSayler.com/body language gift, all one word. And it's 5 little known things that you do that affect how other people see you. And we cover some of the topics more in depth that we covered today.
Fabulous. Sharon, thanks for making time today. And folks, as you probably know, I come out with more information daily about some element of job hunting. You can find my YouTube channel easily at jobsearchtv.com. If you're listening to this in podcast form, No BS Job Search Advice Radio comes out daily with advice for job hunters that's good anywhere in the world. I hope you enjoy the show. Subscribe, and hope to be able to help you in some aspect of your search. Hope you have a great day, and take care.